Everyone, welcome to this edition of Brilliant But Lazy. I'm your host, Alan Cram, and normally I'm joined by a different Josh. Josh Howell could not make it today. He was busy at a Comic-Con last weekend, but that was an excuse for me and my guest host today. Today I'm welcoming Josh Berkey from Victims and Villains and the Horrific Hope Film Festival here to talk about Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
Hello. We will
Welcome,
see
Josh.
if the gods are truly furious by the end of this episode.
Yeah. So this is a film that came out this past weekend where you and I were both busy at Creature Feature Weekend in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Shout out to that. But we still made time to see Shazam. You saw it before the event. I saw it afterwards. The only reason I went to see Shazam was because of this podcast. So we are here, a little bit of a different recording setup. So if the quality is a little bit off, that is why. I am currently in my office at work doing this after hours because I have to. There wasn't enough time for me to go home and come back for an event tonight. So we're here. We're going to talk about Shazam. We've got a lot to talk about. But I also think this is not going to be a very long episode. So before we get into Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods, Josh, what were your thoughts on the first Shazam from 2018?
I always forget about how much I love that movie until a couple months to a year go by and I get bored and find myself rewatching it. I think that's probably one of the strongest DCEU films we've gotten so far.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was such a tall order. As far as like origin stories go, I definitely feel like they hit all of the right emotional beats. The villain in it is great. Mark Strong's fantastic. I love the relationship between Jack Dylan Grazer and Zachary Levi. Also love him and Grazer and Asher Angel, Billy Batson. There's a lot that I really like about that movie, and I feel like it's set the bar pretty high for any sequels that would follow afterwards.
Yeah, I enjoy that one a lot. It is one of the stronger DCEU films that we got and probably will get at this point. I like the holiday. I'm a sucker for any movie that's set at the holidays, but not a holiday film. That's just the Shane Black fan in me. So I always enjoy that. It's in Philadelphia, which I have a connection to, like from like having family out there. So I know the city a bit. So it's nice having a superhero story take place in Pennsylvania, my home state. But yeah, I enjoyed that one. I had to watch it for my my other podcast. You have to watch this podcast. But I remember in 2019 when it came out, of the Captain Marvel movies that came out, I saw Captain Marvel twice on like opening weekend, and then didn't see Shazam at all. So, but yeah. So let's talk a bit about Shazam: Fury of the Gods. We're going to go spoiler free. So if you haven't seen the film yet, you can listen to us for a bit, and then we will let you know when we're going to deep dive into spoilers, even though the big spoilers were in the marketing for the movie. Yeah, I mean, I only saw that the director tweeted about, well, I guess don't watch the marketing for my movie because it spoils this cameo. So, I was not looking forward to this movie at all. Like when I bought my tickets, I purposely bought a ticket for another movie to justify going to the movies for this. I saw an early screening of Dungeons and Dragons, which we'll probably be talking about next time on Brilliant But Lazy. But so I did a double feature. This was the second one. And I'm very upset that I did not fall asleep during this one, but I fell asleep during D&D because I was just exhausted from all the fun that we had at Creature Feature.
Yeah, the Creature Feature was a lot of fun. I stayed way longer than you on Saturday and functioned
Hmm.
on like very little sleep Sunday, so I understand. This movie I was very meh about, and that's how I feel about superhero movies in general around this time. I feel like the fatigue is a very real thing, and no matter how good I like a film or like the people that are involved in it, it's a way to pass the time at this point.
Yeah.
And I did the spoiler review for our YouTube channel, and I will say that there are certain things I feel like this film does better than the original film, and there are things that this film does worse than the original film.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. One of the things that bugs me about this movie, and I think the DCEU in general, is there's a lot of setup in the first film for storylines for the sequel. And then you get to the sequel and they're all dropped.
Yeah.
Ex- uh, um, because they set up Mark Strong returning at the end of the first Shazam, and then spoilers, he's not in the movie until the second post credit scene, um, setting up a third Shazam movie, which I don't know if we're going to get after the box office this one.
Yeah.
Um, but you also have the first Shazam ending with Superman showing up, and it's just a thing that happened that they talk about, but they don't address. I don't even think they say the word Superman at all in
Nope.
the movie. Um, so it like I was like there was so much great potential for the next Shazam story. And we'll get into details on other things that have come out of the movie since its release. Like when you have the director and the star coming out saying things that hurt the movie, like after it bombs at the box office, usually I'd be like, well, that's just you making excuses. But I think for this one, some of the complaints are legitimate. But we'll get into that later. My biggest problem with this movie is Zachary Levi's performance. I I don't understand why.
Disconnect.
What?
I was gonna say that disconnect. That's been a common complaint I've seen around is that like Zachary Levi's Shazam still feels like he's the shadow or the projection rather of the 14-year-old at Billy Batson from the first film.
Mm-hmm.
And then Asher Angel's character, you can you can tell that he has matured.
Yeah, yeah, and that's my big problem with it. I think everyone else in the Shazam family does a great job of uh, the kids and the adult counterparts do a good job of finding that balance because yes, they have age, but they also have matured a bit. But Shazam hasn't. Like Zachary Levi has not, and that really took me out of it. And luckily, he's not in it as much. Like I feel like this is more of a what's his brother's name?
Oh,
Um,
Freddie
Freddie.
Freeman.
I feel like this is more of a Freddie movie because he has more to do in this than Billy Batson.
Yeah, which is so weird for you to take the star of your what you're shaping to be a trilogy or a franchise and say, all right, we're going to focus on the side character.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, Jack Dylan Grazer at this point has done more films, I feel like, than Asher Angels. Like, I understand it from like point of view, from
Yeah,
like a marketing standpoint, but from like a narrative standpoint, it doesn't make sense.
yeah. Um, but at the same time, Freddie has the romantic story, and that was one of the better parts of this movie for me was his Freddie and Anne, played by West Side Story's Rachel Ziegler. I thought she was fantastic in this. Like the fact that she has to struggle for work breaks my heart because she was good in West Side Story. Like as much as I crap on Steven Spielberg's unnecessary West Side Story, she was good in it, and she's good in this. Um, and I really like her arc in the movie, which we'll get into in spoilers. But I thought the chemistry there was good. But Billy Batson didn't really have that story. Like it was him and in the first one they kind of set it up with I think it's Mary.
Yeah. And I feel like so Grace Caroline Curry plays Mary and Mary Marvel in this. And I feel like they set her up in this movie to kind of like they set them up to almost kind of feel like they're like connected in like the romantic sense, or at least
Yeah.
they it seems like they tried. There are different points in the movie where like they'll be having like the meetings like afterwards, and it feels like she's kind of almost like set up to be this like mother figure. It's very weird. It feels like borderline like incestuous.
Yeah, it they become more brother and sister in this one, which is fine
Yeah.
because that's what they are. But it's weird that that whole story was dropped. All the hallway lights just went off because I have my door closed and they're sound activated, so that's fun. I'm in the complete dark now except for my light on top of my laptop. Um, let's talk a bit about Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu as the villains of this movie. Um, that's a weird combination, but I'm here for it. I thought they were fine. Um, the MacGuffin of the whole film is the staff from the first film, um, which they steal in the beginning and then just are fighting over the whole time. What do you think of the villains in this compared to other
uh
DC movies?
so Helen Mirren definitely felt predictable. I'll talk more about her in the spoilers because I feel like you can't do it.
Yeah,
I feel like Lucy Liu, she ended up being actually my favorite part of this movie. And I liked her because I felt like her character welcomed a little bit of element of horror, which I am kind of like the go-to horror guy for victims and villains. And so like also knowing the fact that the director of this movie, David F. Sandberg, like got his start in horror and kind of like brought a little bit of that back, I thought was really fantastic. And I just really loved her story arc. I thought that felt it felt kind of shallow, but also at the same time, like it gripped me a lot more than some of the other arcs that they had going on in the movie.
yeah. I can see Lucy Liu being your favorite part of this. I can see the horror aspect of it. I think the scene stealer for me though was the wizard Shazam. Uh,
He was
I'm
great.
I'm blanking on his name and I want to get it right. Jimon Hanzu. Um, he has a bigger part in this one, and it's worth it. I can absolutely forgive the film for they do the thing of we saw you die in the last one. Oh well, I just went to another plane, so now I can be back in the story, which works out fine for me because he was enjoyable. Like I'll look past that just so we can have him in the movie.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I
I don't know what else to say without getting into spoilers.
I don't really feel like there's a whole lot else that you can do without getting into spoilers. I mean, this movie is like it's really basic. Uh, it's it feels like a really general, like yeah.
Of the Shazam films, because I'm counting Black Adam in this. Of the three, where do you rank this one?
This one would definitely be the second one. It would be Black Adam, Fury of the Gods, Shazam.
And Shazam is your number one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, same here. Like I would much rather watch this again than ever watch Black Adam again. Regardless of the news that's come out recently. So I just want to see where I rated. I can't remember where I rated Black Adam. I gave Black Adam 2 stars on Letterboxd. I'm going to give this a 3.
Mm.
Because it has its issues, but it's still enjoyable. There were a lot of kids in the theater when I saw it, and this is for kids. Like that's what it is, and it's fine for that.
Yeah, I feel like this is like the closest thing that DC is currently making that is like for the family.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be Happy Meal toys for Joker 2. So
Darn.
yeah. Um, all right. So with that, we'll get into spoilers here. And I want to start off by my talking. I talked a bit about the top of the show about uh enjoying the first Shazam because it's part of like being takes place in Philadelphia, my home state in Pennsylvania. I don't know what it is with DC films, but it's happened twice now, and I need to call it out. DC has now twice cut off a Pennsylvania city from the rest of the world, um, and blown up one of the iconic sports stadiums. So I don't know what we did to some like a producer at DC, but I feel like this is the new giant like mechanical spider thing that's happening. Like we need to find a way to blow up something in Pennsylvania and cut them off from the rest of the world because no one deserves to get out.
Are you including the Dark Knight Rises
I
and that?
am.
That is
Yes,
the. So I feel like that doesn't technically count just
it
because you
counts.
filmed there.
No, it counts. That's definitely Heinz Field in Pennsylvania. Like that's Pittsburgh. Like
I'd say.
I was there for that scene. It's Pittsburgh, dude.
I mean, but it's technically Gotham. This takes place in actual Philadelphia. Like
Yes,
it's congruent in the story.
yes. No, it is, but it's still like on film. You have a Pennsylvania location being blown up after being cut off from the rest of the world. Like it's somebody's got a vendetta against us, and I think they're from New Jersey or Ohio. We've got enemies on both sides. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Um, so yeah, let's talk a bit about Helen Mirren. You had some or the villains. You had some spoiler thoughts you wanted to share.
Yeah, so I think I liked Helen Mirren's redemption in the end, and I liked that there was like some reserve for her character because I felt like for as shallow as this movie feels, I feel like she's one of the pockets of actual like depths that you're actually getting to see. And I loved how like her arc and Lucy Liu's arc felt like an inverse of one another to where when you look in the beginning of the film, Mirren definitely feels like the real threat. By the time you get to the climax of the film, it is Lucy Liu that becomes the real threat.
Yeah, yeah. I liked how there were three different tiers of villains here. You had Rachel Ziegler, who's like kind of playing both sides the whole film. Then you have Helen Mirren, who's like, okay, I can like this is what we want to do. This is our mission. And then you have Lucy who's like, no, we're going to take everything. So I like that you had the infighting between the three of them because if they were all went along with it, I feel like we've seen that before where it's all three
Yeah.
of them like, being like, oh yeah, we're going to take over everything. The fact that you had them infighting and not getting along and disagreeing, I think really helped the three of them as characters. It gave them something to do besides laughing, doing evil laughs and shooting lightning bolts.
Yeah, it's like to quote Shazam, they're the age difference between the three of them is really weird, but I think that the story works better because you have that age difference to where Helen is clearly the more mature of the
Yeah,
three, and Calypso with Lucy Liu is kind of like next. Like she hasn't quite been where Helen Mirren's character has been. And I loved that you had that friction there, but also at the
mm,
same time, like it allowed them to play on like different types of villainry. Yeah.
yeah. What else? I'm trying to think what else spoiler. Like, there's not really much to spoil in this movie. They blow up Philly Stadium.
Well,
Oh,
there's not much to spoil because they did it to
they
themselves.
did. So the big thing was they revealed one of the big cameos in the movie in the marketing, and it came out. And I saw screenshots of it like immediately as soon as the trailer came out. It's the cameo of Wonder Woman, where they actually got Gal Gadot, and
Why would you place that in your marketing? Did they learn nothing from BVS and Doomsday? Like, this
no,
is almost the same type of situation where you have a protagonist who dies, and you're basically putting some semblance of his death in the marketing campaign.
yeah, it makes no sense to me. And like I want to be hopeful for the DCU with James Gunn taking over with Peter Safran. But if the marketing department's going to make choices like this, like it's going to ruin the experience of the film for me. Like I don't toys leaking is one thing, but putting actual frames of one of your three main characters in this spin-off movie, like in a trailer that airs on YouTube or TV, like it's just dumb.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I think to like eh, I'm hoping that with Gunn kind of taking the helm of this, they're going to also be in charge of kind of the marketing and what goes out, what posters look like.
Yeah.
Maybe even taking a page out of Feige's book, because what is it? There's that subreddit thing. I don't know if you guys have talked about it, but
Yeah.
like he's like trying to find out who leaked the Quantum Mania leaks, and he's going after them in court. And
Yeah.
he's going to make examples out of them. And I think
Yeah.
honestly, I got so sick and tired of spoiling films for myself because people don't know how to assemble trailers like that. I and I I stopped watching trailers.
Yeah.
I was like, at this point, I would rather just go in completely blind.
That's how I am. I will watch a teaser trailer as many times as I want because it's a teaser trailer. There's not usually any real meat to that trailer.
Yeah.
Usually it's a good musical hook, but a theatrical, like the final trailers, I will just avoid. If I see them in the theaters in front of another movie, that's great. But I'm not going to seek them out. Like the talking about Marvel, the new trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy that came out during the Super Bowl. It was okay. I like the other trailer better because it doesn't give you much. It just gives you a sample of what this movie's going to feel like, what it's going to like, the vibe of it, and then you just move on.
Yep.
Like I probably won't watch another trailer for The Flash because I know the one thing I need to know to go see the Flash movie, and it's Michael Keaton. Like I know he's there. Like I didn't need a trailer for it, but the fact that he's there, I'm in. I didn't see the trailers for this. Like they released, I think I saw maybe one teaser trailer months ago, and then I know I didn't see the theatrical trailer unless it played in front of something. So
Yeah, even if I'm going to like the movies and like I still bring headphones and will watch something on a streaming platform, or I'll read or scroll through TikTok while the previews are going on, because I like the feeling of like arriving to a film early because it's nostalgic, but I'm just at this point where I don't watch it. And I think in the last year I've watched two trailers. I've watched Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent and the most recent Flash trailer we got because I was just too curious.
yeah, I don't get that extreme with it because the trailers are a part of the movie going experience for me. So I want to be able to see them in front of the movies on the big screen. Like I think one of the highlights of my Shazam screening was seeing the Flash trailer. They didn't have it formatted right, so it didn't take up the whole screen, which was
No,
dumb.
they didn't have it right for us either.
Did you see it at AMC?
I saw mine in at Regal,
Okay.
but they still didn't have it right.
Maybe that's just how the movie's formatted then. Maybe they just have that trailer for IMAX. So
Maybe.
um The one thing that I was surprised about from this movie was that the whole thing can be boiled down to a giant Skittles commercial.
Yeah, which is really weird. Like I remember talking about this movie with someone recently, and we got on the subject of unicorns. And I was like, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, last act just makes it completely just makes like unicorns completely vicious, and
Yeah.
it's wonderful. But it is a Skittles commercial.
Yeah. So I will say, like, the one thing I was very impressed by was this film does have a strong third act, which I cannot really say for many other DCEU films. Like, the third act for BVS is a mess, Wonder Woman's a mess, Suicide Squad, the whole film's a mess, but that third act is horrible. Um, this has a strong third act for me because you have like all the characters doing their own part. All the stories are at least intriguing. So you have like the Shazam family and the wizard going off to find unicorns. You have Billy doing his thing. You have Freddy trying to save Anne. Um, it was a compelling third act, and I really enjoyed that because you had that weight of Billy and his foster mom. Like that scene, um, that scene really drove home the third act for me.
Yeah, that scene in particular where she's like, I want to see my Billy before you leave, and they
Yeah.
have that moment. I was not expecting to like almost tear up in this movie because it's a Shazam movie. I just don't think that the first one was like goofy and whimsical, so you don't expect to have that.
Yeah.
And when he says "I love you, mom," like it almost broke me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I will say that I think to your point, I think this film does do the third act is really good because you have the rest of the film feels like there's so many storylines that are going on that somehow they found a way to streamline the majority of those storylines in the third act and still pull everything to the showdown between Lou and Levi.
Yeah. And the moment between him and his mom or his foster mom, there's like a brief moment in the first act to set that up. And if you blink, you miss it. But it pays off so well. Like I wanted it to, and I'm glad they were able to stick that landing. My favorite scene was with Zach Levi was where he transformed back into Billy Batson. So, um, so let's talk post credit scenes here before we get into the drama of what is Shazam: Fury of the movie star and director. Um, so we have the first post credit scene with um, I forget their names.
Yeah,
Hargrave, is that right?
yeah, and Hargrave and Econmos, aka Diebeard. Throw
Yeah,
that in there.
yeah. So you have them come in to recruit Shazam for the Justice Society. Um, and then he gets confused because he thinks they're going to say Justice League and agrees to it before they say Society. And he goes off on a whole tangent about why would you have two groups named Justice as the first part.
Which, which before you continue, like as a comic fan, I've always found that super valid. That is such a valid argument. Like, why would you have a Justice League and a Justice Society?
It
And I know
was,
Justice Society came first,
yeah.
but like still, as a comic book reader, I'm like, I've never gotten on board with that.
It,
Always gone
it
with the Justice League. So
if you look at it in terms of Marvel, it's like you have the Avengers Initiative that is in the first phase of the MCU. You have the Avengers Initiative, and then going forward, you have the Avengers. Like it's two completely different things, but one evolved out of the other.
sure.
Um, Speaking of Avengers, though, he looks up different words that you could use instead of justice, and the Avengers Society is one of them, which was probably my favorite joke that they made in this. But I was like, even though it's my favorite, I was like, really, we're gonna do that? Okay, like, all right,
Yeah, I thought that was really, really funny. Um, that had me. I didn't know how you took it when you texted me.
I enjoyed the joke. I'm good. I'm good for a good good fun crossover joke like that. Like, one of my favorite moments in Spider-Man from 2002 is um uh you're not Superman, like for Aunt May talking to Peter Parker.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Is this the part where we're going to talk about some of the drama that's been
yeah,
some of the
real,
news that's come out? Because I feel like you can't talk about this scene and not talk about the news
yeah, real,
related to said scene.
yeah. So the news is Zachary Levi has gone to Instagram stories. And his caption to what I'm about to read is, "The truth shall set you free." The rap confirms that in Shazam: Fury of the Gods, the Justice Society from Black Adam were recruiting Shazam in the post-credit scenes. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, denied access, and David Sandberg, the director of Shazam, had to make last-minute decision to add Amelia and John. Uh, Johnson attempted to restructure the DCEU, centering him and Henry Cavill's Superman. The Rock did not allow Zachary Levi to cameo in the post-credit scene in Black Adam. So pretty much, this was exactly what I thought was happening. The Rock was trying to make it all about himself. He wanted Black Adam to be the power change in the DC universe, like, and it made his film suffer, and it hurt this film too. So way to go, Dwayne Johnson. You hurt two films.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite proverbs is the that it discusses about how the downfall of discusses basically a bit like the downfall of pride. Pride comes before the fall. And like in Johnson's prideful approach to this passion project, he basically destroyed two franchises in the process because at this point, we're probably not going to see a Black Adam anytime again. If we see Black Adam, it will probably be as a character within like an ensemble. Probably not going to see him ever again. And I think after the box office numbers for this one, we're probably not going to see Levi for a while either.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that I read was the common denominator between um like, Peter Safran, who's one of the heads of DC right now, was producer on both Shazam films. The Henry Cavill cameo they wanted at the end of the first Shazam fell through because of scheduling things, which happens. Um, but he was also like still producer on this one. So The Rock getting the boot and like everything changing after whatever they were trying to set up with Black Adam probably has something to do with the fact that Peter Safran's a little upset about everything that's happened. So I don't know if we will ever see The Rock again as Black Adam, and I don't want to because outside of a multiverse story, if we're going to do go that route and do like a crisis event, like I don't need to ever see him again and as that character.
Yeah, like the Rock kind of setting up. I think that's one of the reasons where Black Adam really fell is that he didn't understand the source material. I understand it where he's coming from as a person of color that
Mm-hmm.
outside of Black Panther, we don't really have any other uh you know persons of color, people of color as forefronts leading big budget comic book films. And the this definitely seemed to be a way for them to kind of make that. That's why he passionately like pleaded and like drove this thing for 15 years.
It, in that argument, like I get that, but at the same time, you have DC scrapping Batgirl, which has Leslie Grace as Barbara Gordon, and
Still a travesty.
Yeah, and it's like there's so much wrong with the DC universe that I don't know how they can course correct without just doing a full reboot. Like I'm hoping whatever Gunn has planned works, but I have little faith right now.
Yeah, and like yeah, the that rap article also talks about that like it was supposed to be Superman, or it was supposed to be Shazam in place of Superman. And the idea of making it like the structuring the DCEU to be Superman versus Black Adam doesn't make sense.
No.
Not from a perspective at all. Like, yes, they fought in the comics, but they've always fought in larger ensemble storylines.
Yeah.
They have done an animated short film where it is Superman versus Black Adam, but Shazam is also in that
Yeah.
storyline. And so here you have a character that is essentially stripped of his comic heritage and pushed to kind of be a story of a narrative almost on race, and you strip it away from like what it actually like was in the comics.
Yeah. And the other thing that bugs me about this whole discourse with The Rock and all of this is you have the Snyder fanboys who are blasting the film because they wanted Henry Cavill to come back. So this just like anything that DC did with this film was going to get hate on from those fans because they're resetting the universe and Henry Cavill's out, which is just a ridiculous state of mind to be in. Like, if you're a fan of this stuff, you're a fan of the characters, not the actors. Like I grew up in the Batman franchise where it's Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, and George Clooney, and I like two of them. The third one's a thing, but it's about the character. Like the character stays the same. It's a different take on the character, but DC's always like the MCU's been lucky that they haven't had to recast a lot of major characters.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see how DC handles it.
Yeah.
Because right now it's not well.
I think on the flip side of that, bringing it back to Shazam, it really breaks my heart that we didn't get to see Audris Hodge and the other two cast members from Black Adam, because Hodge was my favorite part of Black Adam. I loved his Hawkman, and I walked out of that theater saying I would love for a Hawkman movie. We'll probably never see it, but I thought that he was the best part of that movie, and I would have loved to see them approach him.
If we only get a Justice Society movie out of Black Adam, I'm fine with that. Like if the Justice Society stays a thing in Gunn's DCU, I'm all for it.
Yeah, same. Because I thought that each one of those actors did an amazing job. It makes me sad that Pierce Brosnan is not going to be returning as Dr. Fate, because I thought he was fantastic as well.
Yeah.
But Hodge was definitely my favorite part of that movie, and he's one of my favorite actors working today.
The last news story I want to talk about is David Sandberg coming out and saying that he's done with superhero movies after the reception of this one, because of the fans online. He tweeted, on Rotten Tomatoes, I just got my lowest critic score and my highest audience score on the same film. I wasn't expecting a repeat of the first movie critically, but I was still a little surprised because I think it's a good film. Oh, well. Then he goes on to say that he's done with superhero movies and going back to horror for a bit. So there you go, Josh.
Look, I'm all for him. You know, I think that you know, as a mental health advocate and the president of an organization that creates content specifically to talk about mental health, like I feel like you need doing this type of movie, you need it takes its toll on your mental health, man, because people are ruthless. Like you see how I won't say all of the fandom, but there's a lot of Snyder fanboys that are super toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And like, then you also have like people, there's like a sense of entitlement from comic book fans that like they feel entitled to good stories. And if they don't get it, like, I might not necessarily have enjoyed Black Adam. I don't think it sucked. I think that there are redeemable moments in that movie, just kind of like as an example. It's not the best comic book movie. It's not the worst. But at the same time, like I still had a fun time with it. So
Yeah.
like it's about finding the joy in this stuff like that. And I think for Sandberg, like if he finds better peace of mind making horror films or comedies or
Yeah.
whatever, like please make it. Consider your mental health first.
Yeah. And I going off what you were saying, I had a thought. I lost it. Um, I think part of the reason comic book fans feel entitled to good stories is because the source material is there. It's just the execution from these big conglomerates who own the properties don't know how to execute that well because they have to tie it. I think Marvel's done a good job of this, but they have to tie everything in together to make one big story. And I think DC hasn't had that. And I think we're really seeing how much of a mess it has been for the last 10 years since Man of Steel at the end of the DCEU. Like it's just a giant mess that they are trying to clean up the best they can. And I hope they do, but I'm worried at this point. So
Yeah, but I mean, also at the same time, like I think the DCU has given us like real gems of films. Like Man of Steel is a great movie. I will die on the hill that loves Birds of Prey. It is one
yeah,
of my favorite DCU films.
they've definitely made solid films, but their problem has been the universe.
Connect.
They're trying to connect everything, and this is where you see the disconnect between Black Adam and Shazam is the prime example of that. When you have when you have a Shazam villain getting their own film and you don't mention Shazam at all, that's a bit confusing. That's like doing a Joker movie without Batman. Oh wait, they're doing two. Um, and it's just weird. Like I wanted to, I just want the best for these characters in these stories. We'll have to see what happens.
That's fair, but I also think to like a degree that like, you know, DC has been making great films since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You go back to Superman, Superman 2, Batman, Batman Returns. We both love Batman Forever. Even the animated stuff that DC has made in films have been pretty decent for the most part, and they've all been, but they're all their own kind of thing. And then
Yeah,
Marvel comes out and connects everything, and comic book fans, and this is the common complaint I feel, is that like you're saying, like people feel like the DCEU is a mess. It's because it is a mess. There's no sense of connectivity or continuity or communication between its creators, which is something that you need if you're going to make a film that is connected. On top of that as well is that like you need to, if you're going to do continuity, you need to like have that communication, but also b, don't do what Marvel's doing. Like do your own thing.
yeah.
And it just kind of seemed like for a while that they've just been trying to like either copy Marvel or like catch up to Marvel in some way, and so like your films suffer because of that. I don't think it's necessarily the films that are like, we talked about like the disconnect between Asher Angel and Zachary Levi in this
Mm-hmm.
film. That's not on them. That's on the script.
Yeah,
And I think that a lot of that problem comes from the script. It also feels very weird to me that you have something set in the same universe, but it's released by a different studio.
that's a rights thing, like the New Line thing.
How though?
I think New Line has the distribution rights, but DC has the film rights. New Line's also part of DC, so it or part
Yeah.
of Warner Brothers. So
Yeah.
it's a whole big long thing that I don't know the specifics on, but yeah. That's all I have on Shazam: Fury of the Gods.
I want to say this one last thing is we talked about this in the spoiler free section. We talked about how the first film set up multiple storylines that had no payoff.
Mm-hmm.
One of which also being Mr. Mind.
Yeah.
If you guys don't know who Mr. Mind is, he is the caterpillar that is like a telepath, and he is one of like Shazam's like biggest foes. And they set him up to be the villain of the second film, and then did nothing with him.
Yeah.
And they like made a mockery of him in the like the actual end credit scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know if we're ever going to get a payoff for that, but and there was one last thing I wanted to mention. Did you catch the other cameo in this in Philadelphia?
I did. It is the original actor who plays the first version of Shazam.
Yeah.
I don't remember the guy's.
His name is Michael Gray. He plays Man on the Street in this, but he was the original Shazam, and he calls him by Captain Marvel. Yes. Says, way to go, Captain Marvel. I was like, oh, that's cool that they actually snuck that in there. So
yeah, that was a great little cameo. And they had him like also in like the original Shazam colors, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all I've got on Shazam. Josh, where can people find you?
You guys can follow me. I'm on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia, and then I'm also make TikTok videos occasionally, randomly and sporadically over on TikTok at Gent Ghostface GENT.
All right, and you can find me on my show. You have to watch this podcast on all major podcasting platforms: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Until next time, for Brilliant but Lazy, I'm Alan. Thank you for joining us, Josh. And we will see you again in 2 weeks.